This is part two of why I joined the Navy, and I think let's call it what I did while I was in the Navy. Remember, I was only 14 years old, and I was still a little bit green under the gills and not sure what service life was about. Anyway, we'll pick the story up as when I arrived in Melbourne and was on the bus to HMAS Cerberus, which was a 2-hour trip out of Melbourne. When we arrived at the base, I was disembarked from the bus and told to line up with some other people who were there, that we would be picked up by the representatives of our various training departments. While we were standing there, there were a number of senior sailors arrived from various branches of the Navy to collect their recruits. The guys, you know, like from gunnery or from signals and places like that, so that's okay. Anyway, eventually standing there, we're nattering, and eventually the guys were gradually disappearing, and until eventually there was only one person left, and that was me. I'm standing there wondering what's gone wrong, because everybody else had gone and there was nobody else seemed to be interested in me. So I'm standing there looking around the place and looking across the parade ground and all this sort of stuff, and I spot a bloke in the far distance dressed up in a pretty fancy uniform. He had on a khaki shirt, a pair of dark blue trousers with a big red stripe down the side, a white belt, and he was wearing a white pith helmet and sort of marching quite military-like. And I thought, well, he's the only bloke around and he looks a bit like a Marine. In my green thinking, I thought, hey, you know, my luck's changed. They're going to teach me to be a Marine. Maybe this guy's coming to get me. Anyway, he made a turn and marched across the parade ground and came to stop in front of me, put out his hand and introduced himself as bandsman John Singleton. You know, at the word bandsman, I sort of was a little bit taken aback. I thought, no, come on, I'm not in the band, I'm here to be a seaman or a Marine. Yeah, let's do that. And he said, no, he said, this is your name and you're allocated to be a musician in the musicians branch. I thought, now come on, you made a mistake. So I told him, you know, no, he couldn't be right. His guy must have got mistaken, or they've got our names crossed up or something like that. But anyway, that was no arguing with him. I was then duly escorted, I suppose, to the down to the Naval School of Music that was way over the other side of the naval barracks, and taken to see the, I suppose, the head musician or the guy in charge of the school. He was a nice guy. He was a commander, and I think his name was Cole, Commander Cole, something like that. Anyway, he greeted me and sat me down in his office and proceeded to tell me all about my future life as a bandsman and what I was going to do. He told me that I was going to be trained in damage control on board ships. I was going to be trained in firefighting. I was going to be trained in medical, orderly stuff, how to be a stretcher bearer, all that sort of stuff, as well as being trained as a musician. I really didn't want any of this. I was tired and hungry and a bit cranky of being sort of allocated as a bandsman, but you know, I was a bit, still a bit dumb anyway. But I did tell him that, hey, you know, I really didn't want to do this. I wanted to be a seaman. He just said, well, that's sorry about that, but you know, you're here with us now, and this is what you're going to do. So go to the storeroom and see the store officer and be issued with your kit and your 2 instruments. Okay, so, you know, being 14, I started to do what I was told. I eventually found the storeroom and met the store's officer. He issued me with the basic uniforms. I had 2 uniforms, just 2 work uniforms, underwear, you know, all the usual stuff that you get. And then he gave me a clarinet and a violin. He said, these are the instruments you've been allocated. Now, me with a big lip like this, had no hope of playing a clarinet. That requires a whole lot of pucked lip type things. And a violin, well, goodness gracious me, that, that wasn't up to me. That was a sissy instrument, so I didn't want that. But anyway, that's what I was given and told that these are what I was going to learn to play, and just suck it up and see. Anyway, I was things carried on from there. I settled into the routine and all the rest of it. We had quite a lot of routine to do. We did a lot of marching, a lot of the intricate marching that the bands do, and that was all learned on the parade ground. We were also given an amount of general schooling, and we were sort of given lectures and stuff on damage control on the ships. I enjoyed the damage control parts, and I enjoyed being on the ships and on the model ship. I thought that was pretty good. But the other part of being a musician and learning how to play the clarinet and the violin were way, way, way out of my league. Eventually the CO, or the boss, came to the conclusion that, hey, me and musical instruments just didn't sort of work out as being good. He had to talk to me a couple of times. Each time that I sort of talked to him, I asked him for a transfer to another branch in the Navy, back to the seaman's branch mainly, that I could probably learn to get my hands dirty and to become a seaman. But all these requests were being refused. I don't know whether I was still too young. I was only still 14. But anyway, they refused. Anyway, cut a long story short, the Navy in its wisdom decided that they would give me a discharge. On the discharge papers they wrote that I was totally unsuitable for naval service, which I thought that was a bit rough because I hadn't had a chance to do much else in the Navy except march around in the square and learn a little bit about damage control, so I figured that was a bit much. Anyway, they eventually gave me my discharge papers, handed me the rail ticket and sent me off home back to Sydney. So then that ended my Navy career. I spent 95 days in the Navy at this stage. I had really achieved nothing, but the discipline that I had at that stage had done me a world of good, and I was a changed person. I also had an inkling to be on boats. The few boats that I'd been on down in Cerberus while we were practicing damage control sort of, made me want to be on boats. I don't know why, I can't explain it to this day. Anyway, that's about all for this boring story. I hope I didn't bore you too much, but it is true and it's part of my life and will lead on to other, I suppose, equally interesting adventures in my life. So until then, until the next video, it's hooroo from me, and please subscribe to my video and give me the thumbs up. So thank you very much for putting up with me. So hooroo and take care.